Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Liyana Marzuki, and I'll be your host for tonight. Sarawak State election is coming on 18 December 2021. And I'm sure the question that lingers in people's mind is who will be the choice of Sarawak voters come the polling day. Tonight, Merdeka Center, in collaboration with Dialetika TV, is proud to present this topic as a point of discussion. And to deliberate and discuss this topic together with me tonight are three esteemed panelists who are very well versed with Sarawak political scene. Without further ado, may I please introduce them in. First and foremost, I can see this person is the most famous political pollster in Malaysia, none other than Mr. Ibrahim Suffian from Merdeka Center, or famously known as Ben. How are you, Ben?
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me as a host tonight. And together with Ben, I think the second panelist, I can say also he is the most sought after political analyst now in recent time for local political scene, Professor James Chin from University of Tasmania. How are you, Prof?
Good evening.
Good evening. I was told it's so hard to get you nowadays. You're everywhere.
Oh, really? Oh, thank you for telling me.
Okay. Last but not least, we are very fortunate tonight because we have secured the participation of a coaching-based political analyst, Dr. Arnold Puyok from University of Malaysia, Sarawak. How are you, Doctor?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your time tonight. All right, I think many of us out there, the viewers, are very eager to hear the insight from our panelists tonight. And the first round, I think we can start with Ben first. I'm sure Merdeka Center has already concluded its poll and also form up its prediction on Sarawak State election. Perhaps we hear from you first. Who will be the choice of Sarawak voters this Saturday?
Thank you, Liyana, and thank you everyone for making time this evening to be part of this conversation. We are still doing the surveys. What we have learned from previous experiences is that a lot of people, only reveal or give a stronger indication of who they will choose closer to the election. So we are doing more of the work closer as we approach election day. But there are some signs in terms of what the voters' choices are, and we think that looking at how things are, the focus will be on several seats, perhaps around 20 seats out of the 82 contested seats that will be fought over in this particular state election. I think Prof. James and also Arnold are going to discuss further into the dynamics. I think it's safe to say that based on the surveys overall, GPS is still leading as a strong party that has been administering the state for so many decades. So they're clearly in the lead. So the big question that I think we are all looking at is how will they perform in this election? Will they do better, the same as last election, which they won 72 out of 82 seats, or will they perform slightly poorer than before? So I think we have these two esteemed scholars with us who will, I think, dig deeper and share. But permit me, Liyana, just to share a little bit of slides to show our viewers where, what led us to this election and how have Sarawakians voted before. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so let me just give a very quick breakdown in terms of the statistics and also perhaps some of the dynamics there. We are looking at 82 constituencies being contested this election. There are many candidates, and also there are very many parties. Most of these seats are going to see more than 3 corner contests, GPS, and then we have PH, there's DAP or PKR, and then we have the new state-based parties like PSB, Parti Sarawak Bersatu, PBK, Parti Bumi Kenyalang, and a few other parties, as well as many independent candidates. In terms of the breakdown of the seats, we do notice that, like every other place in Malaysia, the seats or constituencies are basically defined by the ethnic characteristics. We have 22 Iban majority seats. We have 15 Chinese majority seats, where parties like DAP, some maybe 1 or 2 PKR and SUPP and even PSB probably will be fighting over the seats. We have 18 Sarawak Malay seats centered around the first division around Kuching, and then we have 7 Bidayo seats, which is slightly south of Kuching in the Bau Opa area down there, marked with orange. And then we have 6 Melanau seats, which is in the coastline near Bating Maru and south of, to the west of Sibu. And then the rest are Iban seats and mixed ethnic constituencies of about 9 seats. There are also several Orang Ulu seats comprising Kenyah, Kelabit, and other ethnicities there. So each of these groups, will have their own community leaders that are vying for role. We also have religious leaders that are crossing over into politics. We have recently, I think one of the church leaders, the Anglican Church of Sarawak leader, who's come across to become a candidate as well. So this will be a very interesting contest. In terms of how things are, in the most recent election, in 2018 general election, at that time it was Barisan Nasional Sarawak, now GPS. They won 52.48% of the popular votes, followed by DAP, PKR, 23% and about 20% each. So, the PH at that time was quite close in terms of winning seats. But this was in some ways the result of internal dynamics within the local areas, within the parties itself. I'll just speak about that shortly. So this was the result in 2018. You can see mostly blue, Barisan Nasional blue, but the areas south of Kuching and the areas in the middle of the state are all contested and won by the opposition. So we group this into 3 zones. We have the Bidayo zone, which crossed over to the opposition in 2018. We have the central zone here around Sibu, which was won by PH as well, and also some won by Barisan Nasional, but very marginally, like Lubuk Antu down here. And then we have this Langau area north of Sibu on the way to Bintulu, which is the Iban as well as Orang Ulu zone. So these are areas where I think we will look at the result. There are also some seats in the north near Miri and up here near Mulu, where the opposition made some headway as well. So I think our other panelists will touch on this because they have people looking at those places. Overall, in terms of the performance of Barisan Nasional Sarawak and now GPS from 2013 to 2018, we just transposed the general election and state election results. We can see that it's an up and down story. It was about 5% from general election 2013 to state election 2016. This is during the time of Arwah or late Chief Minister Adnan Satim's election, 62%. But during the general election, perhaps because of the wave effect, GST and other issues, BN Sarawak lost nearly 10% of the popular vote. At that time, it goes down to about 52.5. So now we are looking at state election 2021. What will be the new number there? We'll find out on Saturday. Yeah. Just some quick comments. In 2016, we saw the Adnan Satim tsunami, which helped Barisan Nasional Sarawak, now GPS. They won 72 out of the 82 state seats. So this is the question that we're looking for Saturday. Will they be able to repeat this success? They also won a few Chinese semi-urban seats in Batu Kawa, Meradong, Repuk, and Piasau. And he, during this time, Chief Minister Adnan Satim, brought a very strong, inclusive message encompassing all the communities in Sarawak, but very strong Sarawak nationalist identity into the process. In between, we saw helicopter accidents in West Malaysia, which helicopter accidents which are created by elections, as well as by-elections in Sungai Besar and Kuala Kangsar, which were watershed events in Malaysian politics. In 2018, which was the first election under Chief Minister Abang Zohari, or Abang Jo as we call him, we saw internal conflicts within Parti Rakyat Sarawak, SUPP, and PBB, which caused BN Sarawak at that time to lose 12 seats out of 31 seats, which is a historical low. So this election is pivotal because it will confirm or deny the issues that had plagued the party in 2018 has been resolved, or is continued to simmer and continued to become a bigger problem. So after general election 14, PBB led a pullout from BN, created GPS, more independent, more autonomy, but continues to maintain a very flexible, cooperative stand with PPBM and UMNO. So now it's part of the ruling national coalition, but maintains a separate identity and positioning in Sarawak. So this is the result in 2016. I won't dwell so much time here, but we can just see that at that time, Barisan Nasional had 62% popular vote and winning 72 seats. Pakatan Harapan won 10 seats. So just a quick point before I give it back to Liyana. We had the Sheraton move, which took place in March 2020. GPS joined the federal government. And then immediately soon after, we have the COVID-19 pandemic, which hit the whole world, as well as Sarawak. So I think how Sarawak state government has handled this pandemic and responded with the vaccination and assistance to the public is going to be a key parameter for which they are going to be assessed by voters. And then we also have, what took place yesterday, the passing of the constitutional amendment for Malaysian Agreement 1963. Perhaps we can say something about that as well, which was passed yesterday in the National Parliament, which is a landmark event by itself. Maybe something that's going to play into the minds of voters as well. Other events, factors that we are going to watch in this particular state election is the denial of the new voters, only 18-year-olds and above. They are not able to vote in this election. Will they play a role in influencing the older generation, their parents and other family members? And then this is all encompassing, all-consuming issues of internal dynamics within the parties, within Gabungan Parti Sarawak, GPS, SUPP, PRS and PBB. How will this affect the performance of their candidates contesting in this election? Thirdly, the transformation of UPP to Parti Sarawak Bersatu, which I think in the discussions we have, seems to have a very prominent role in the poster and flag material campaign image in this particular election. Fourthly, the performance of Pakatan Harapan in Sarawak, namely DAP and PKR, can they still keep it together? Can they still hold on to some seats? And fifth, patronage politics. We talk about patronage politics a lot, and how much will it influence the behavior, the choices made by voters? And then finally, this very controversial hot topic about secessionism or independence of Sarawak. Is this a real demand from the grassroots, or is this something that is meant to fire up the emotions and influence people to vote in a certain way? So I'm just going to leave it here and hand it back to you, Liyana.
Thank you, Ben. I think it's very insightful commentaries and prediction of Sarawak state election this Saturday. And the second question, if I can throw this question to Dr. Arnold first, being locally based there. I'm sure you're very familiar with the political issue of Sarawak. My question is, do you agree with what Ben presented just now? The Sarawak voters will definitely choose GPS. It's just that we do not know whether they will have more votes this time around compared to last time. Please, Doctor. I think your mic is.
Yeah. Generally, I agree with what Ben has just said. Of course, in my observation, I think this election surprises me in many ways. Number one, it surprises me because people are becoming more and more curious about PSB. That's number one. And number two, I'm also surprised because of PSB's ability to match GPS in terms of publicity. So you go to Sarawak's urban, semi-urban, or even in the rural areas, if flags, posters, and banners are anything to go by, PSB is basically able to match GPS. But of course, whether or not this will translate into votes, we are not too sure. And then again, even though this is not like, I don't consider this as an ordinary election. This is an extraordinary election in an extraordinary time because of SOPs and things like that. But I think overall, people will still support GPS. But then again, for those fence-sitters, for the young ones, they have an alternative. And interestingly, based on our conversation on the ground with the people in general, they say they would like to pick PSB as the alternative. It's not DAP or it's not PKR or not even BBK for that matter. So I think based on our preliminary analysis, GPS is leading, but I think GPS will not be able to hit more than 76. That is our general assessment. GPS can still win with a 2/3 majority, but it will not hit more than 70 seats. But at best, it can win between 54 or 55 seats. That is enough already to secure a 2/3 majority. And when you look at the seats classification, right? So I classify the seats into three categories. Number one, seats that I call as competitive seats. And number two, seats that I call GPS safe seats. And number three, GPS leading seats. And if you look at this GPS safe and GPS leading seats, most of these seats are in the rural areas, Malay, Melanau areas, Iban areas, and things like that. So I will be concentrating on these 25 competitive seats. So these are the seats where neither GPS nor the opposition can win comfortably. So it can swing the other way. And I think the decision to vote yes, GPS will also be determined by many factors. Now, previously, when you go to the rural area, right, of course, the issue is always development. I think in Sarawak, that is the main issue, development. People are talking about development, things like that. But then again, previously, when people talk about development, it's a development, looking at development as a development to develop the rural area, right? That's the big idea. But now, I think it's development, still development, but development in different forms. When you go to the rural area, you ask the people about development, they say yes, development, but you don't talk about development as a big idea. We want smaller development, but more tangible development. For instance, when we want you to build a road linking our village to Penbonio, we want to see that tomorrow. So when you promise to build school, build Belaraya and all that, it has to be done as quick as you can. So I think this is where GPS has the advantage because they have the resources and they can do that very fast. And I think this will help them in terms of securing more votes, especially among the rural voters in Sarawak. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Dr. Arnold. That question goes to Professor James, of course. I think most of us would think that it's a no-brainer that GPS will win this election. However, I read certain commentaries to state that it won't be a walk in the park for GPS. So perhaps your commentary on that, please.
Right. I'd like to start off by thanking Merdeka Center for inviting me to spend some time here at the forum. It's always good to see old friends like Ben and Arnold again. So again, I like to iterate that I agree with most what was said by Arnold and Ben. The only thing I like to add on to Ben's analysis is that the statistics part, you have to see within the context of how the statistics were collected. So for example, right, in terms of the percentage, obviously things like PBB were the highest percentage of votes because they have the highest number of candidates. So you need to see within the context. And also Malaysia uses first past the post system. So even though DAP, the percentage may be low, but their vote count is very high. So those are the sort of caveats on the place one. But I would really like to start this forum and my comments on a very positive note. The really positive thing is that I think this will be the very best Christmas the Longhouse will be having, because a lot of money is going to the ground. A lot of the the BS that are leftovers, I think they'll be used in the coming weeks during Christmas. So I think it's a very good time to be in the Longhouse this time. But of course, the negative side is that we still have the pandemic in Sarawak, and I think people don't realize how serious it is. But I'll also start off by saying that this is a very unusual election in the sense that I don't really get a sense of the mood of what's happening on the ground. And I think part of it is because of the SOP that's implemented. And this is especially true for the urban areas, the Chinese areas. I think Ben, Arnold, and myself agree that when we look at Sarawak politics for the last 4 or 5 elections, you always start with the assumption that the Chinese or the urban areas are the most competitive arena, because the Chinese really have no loyalties of which way they swing. The big difference is that in the old days and today is that the Chinese are much more focused on performance politics, whether you can deliver or not. So that is a small change. But of course, there are several other unique features about these elections. Arnold has said that this is a pandemic election, and it's a quite unique election. But I also think that it's also an important election for the simple reason that I think, how should I put it, GPS branding or rebranding itself is actually on the line. This is the first time they have ditched the Dutching symbol. I used to joke that the Dutching symbol is the gold standard in the rural areas. So this is the first time they've ditched it, and they try to introduce a new logo. And of course, Arnold will know this very well. Everyone is joking that the way to make GPS loose is to confuse them with the PBK logo, because one is basically ringed out. That's a joke, the sad side. But I think the way to look at this election is that this is really, for me personally, it's really not election. I mean, even before the Agong lifted the state of emergency, right? Even 2 years ago, people said GPS was going to win already. So this is really not so much an election. Like I said, this is really a referendum on Abanjo performance. I said about performance of the Chief Minister, and also whether they can repackage Sarawak Barisan Nasional into this hornbill bird called GPS and get away with the rebranding successfully. So I made an argument that this rebranding is all about Sarawak first, building a state within the larger Malaysian state. So it's really very much a referendum on that, rather than the potential for regime change. Now, what does this mean actually in terms of competitiveness? So I think in terms of the competitiveness, I think everyone is harping, as Ben correctly pointed out, the KPI for our friend Abanjo is really 72 out of 82. It's really how close he gets to that. I think the other side of looking at it is that he cannot afford to get less than 66. So basically, if he gets less than 66, how should I put this politely? His job is at risk. So people think that PBB is very united, very solid, but if you don't perform, the knives will come out as well. So it's not as simple as that. The other angle which people don't talk about is that it's of course the Istana angle. The governorship is only for 5 years, and all this flow-on effect, how will he do, will have a flow-on effect. So I think we need to keep the big picture in mind. This is really not a election as in an election that's widely understood as in election can change government. This is very much a referendum on GPS. Now, on the opposition side, of course, we have something that has never happened in Sarawak for a very, very long time, which is a single party that has put up more than half the candidates of the number of seats in the Dewan Undangan Negeri, which means that they show that we can take over the state government if we win all. So in this election, we have an interesting phenomenon. Parti Bumi Kenyalang, a new kid on the block, out of the blues, they managed to put 73 people on the ballot. Initially, as you know, they wanted 75, 76, but 3 of the candidates didn't show up. In the case of PSB, initially they wanted about 75 candidates. In the end, 70 candidates show up. But as Arnold mentioned, out of the blue, PSB has become a very credible opposition, right? And of course, I mean, we all know that, but I just like to lay out the reasons again. I think they are credible for several reasons. I think the top three reasons is that they are led by a very senior politician. People keep forgetting that Wong Sun Ko has been at the top of the Sarawak political tree for more than 30 years. People forget that, you know, he started off in 1991 and he was immediately appointed the Speaker of the Council Negeri, a very senior position in terms of protocol. And then he became a very senior state minister, and he has served under all the three chief ministers from Tan Mahmud all the way to Abanjo. So we're talking about somebody who's very senior, who knows all the nooks and cranks about the entire Sarawak electoral system and also how the government works. Secondly, I think he is credible because obviously, as Arnold said, in terms of the flag war is just what I call a symbol of the amount of resources available to him, right? So, people think, oh, no big deal, the flags. I mean, most people will be shocked when I tell them that a single flag, because this is an election job, you can charge up to 10 ringgit per flag, So we're talking about big money, really, really big money involved. So it's obviously, and right, he's taking out advertisement, full page advertisements left and right. Again, big money. So for the Sarawak ordinary voters, right, this shows credibility. You got real money, you really want to take over the government. And of course, the third one is that this is a big contrast between him and TBK, is that a lot of his candidates, not all, but a lot of candidates does have some credibility, like XYB, SAOs, and all that sort of people. So for this sort of a three key reason, he has certainly come across, as somebody very credible, even before the election started, and his brand is being reinforced in this election. I think for PSB, right, the only weakness where they don't have a standard answer, right, is that whether they're going to play the diet card, whether they're going to appoint a chief minister. In terms of the other areas, like even the manifesto, right, they produce a beautifully produced manifesto that is almost on par with GPS manifesto. In fact, even better, because they actually tell the truth, right? And the manifesto is translated into very high quality social media videos and what have you. So it shows that, from very early on, it was all well planned out, heavily resources, and quite credible in terms of that. Now, the final one, of course, is PBK. I have to be careful about what I say about PBK because their supporters are very passionate. I'm sure you all know I've been attacked heavily by PBK. So PBK is very passionate, but it's a very interesting political party because it's a political party with only one agenda. I have not come across this sort of political party in the Malaysia context before, right? I mean, most political have several things they want to do, but this one, a single agenda party. And what is the agenda? The agenda, you cannot miss it because it is the tagline of the party in the quest of independence, right? I mean, you can't be more clearer than that, right? I mean, so it is a one platform party, and as I mentioned, it's interesting. They cobble together 73 individuals. Many of them, I know them, and they're willing to put their own money to pay the deposit and stand as candidate. That's quite remarkable, because how should I put it politely? They may not see that money again. So it is quite incredible. People are willing to do that. And of course, I was quite surprised that MACC did something very stupid. Gave them the publicity that money couldn't buy and all that sort of stuff. So I think there are quite a lot of interesting things happening in this election. But I like to come back to my earlier point. This is not a watershed election. It is very much a referendum on Abanjo and whether the GPS rebranding is a success or not. And I'll stop here and let my other co-panelists speak further. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Okay, back to Ben. I remember when we discussed about PRM Laka last time, you mentioned about, the contributing factor, the main contributing factor that will determine the election result is voters' turnouts, right? And you predicted YLBN won, but for Sarawak, of course, the issue is not, the same as Malacca, because what Professor James just now said is a referendum election towards GPS. But my question is, what are the major contributing factor that can help election result in Sarawak?
I think in the case of Sarawak, so I'm just speaking here generally, and so James and Arnold, please jump in. I think looking at this election in Sarawak, I think a big factor here is whether or not people who are working and living in the cities go back to their hometown, to their rumah panjang to vote. I'm not sure in terms of the SOP rules within the state of Sarawak whether it's easy for people to make the move or not. What we do notice is that people of working age, so they might be registered to vote in a rural area, maybe 1 hour outside of Cebu or 2 hours outside of Kuching. Some of them may not go back. So we don't know how much is the percentage, but we think that some of the working adults age 25 to 50 years old, I think we are going to see a slightly lower turnout compared to the general election. We might see that. Second, we also know that many Sarawakians who are living or working in West Malaysia may not go back to vote simply because the flights are limited. And also it's quite close to Christmas, so if they come back now, they probably bust their budget to come home for Christmas. So I think turnout is going to be slightly lower for these working age adults, peoples. But for those that are living in the kawasan, living in the area, the turnout still is going to be quite high. That's one. And number two, it's also how well the local party machinery is able to mobilize people to come out. Because as we know, in some places in Sarawak, it's quite far apart from the polling station. So if the party has resources and they can organize transportation to bring voters out, and they do this, in groups, then it's very likely that they can pull out their own supporters to come out to vote. And I think the third point is patronage, some form of inducement to incentivize voters to come out to vote. I think that's going to play up. We see this happen in many places, particularly rural areas. I just want to be realistic about it because many of the voters who are living in rural areas, they are farmers. And so if you take them out from work, it might take them a whole day to go to and back from the polling station. So they want to be compensated. So they have to be given some money as well. So I think in terms of turnout, it's going to probably be slightly less, but not by much. It's still going to follow the same patterns as before, that the younger ones, the turnout going to be slightly lower than older voters. I don't know, Arnold, what have you seen out there?
Yeah, I can come up with 3 categories of voters here. Again, I didn't do any survey of it, but this is just like a very general observation. The first category of voter, voters who are older. They told us that they are quite afraid to come out and vote because of COVID. And then you have the second category of voters. These are slightly younger voters, professional, between 40 to 45. They say they're not going to vote this time because they are quite frustrated with with our political system, with our politicians and all that. And then the third category of voters are more younger voters. They say that their votes are not going to make any difference. So that's the reason why they do not want to come out and vote. I think if, for instance, if voting turnout is low, of course, that will give GPS, incumbent government, the advantage, because I suspect more of these voters will come out on 18th of December, those who are loyal supporters to GPS. So these are the people who will come out and cast their votes.
Can I just add that in my conversations with the Chinese in the emerging urban areas like Kuching and Cebu, one other reason besides the fact that like Arnold said, they're fed up with both sides and also they're afraid of COVID. One of the other factors that gets cited quite often to me is that when they get the message about the voting, there's also a recommended time. And some of them said that is one, it is not convenient for them. So they're also using that as an excuse not to come out. So I would say that in some of the highly competitive Chinese seats, I suspect the numbers will drop. And those who come out are those who are loyal or diehard supporters. with the backing of the party machinery that provided the transport that they will come out. Otherwise, a lot of them, what I'm hearing from the urban areas, from the urban Chinese, that they really fed up with the system. Just a bit of background. They fed up because they said that both sides cannot deliver. Because on the one hand, they supported PH so strongly in 2018. They didn't get a ministership. They got a deputy ministership. He never delivered, and the government imploded after less than 2 years, and nothing happened to Sarawak. And on the government side, they said that there's somebody there who keep promises, all sorts of grandiose project, like a train or MRT, all sorts of things. They said also cannot deliver. Also, so they said what the heck, stay at home and watch movies.
Thank you, Prof. I think we go back to Dr. Arnold. It's interesting just now, it's an interesting point when you said the real contender is actually PSB rather than Pakatan Harapan. So we saw that, during PRM Melaka, it was a very disastrous outing for them, their performance. How do you see their performance this time around in PRM Sarawak?
You mean PKR and DAP?
PKR, DAP, PH.
Yeah, I mean, we see Anwar here. Anwar has been going from one kampung to another. Well, Anwar still has it, he has the oratory skills. He's trying his best to convince the people to vote for PKR. But then when you look at the mood of the people, the mood is missing. I think after Baru left PKR, so there is like a leadership vacuum there. There is no strong figure to represent PKR Sarawak. So I think that has affected PKR Sarawak a lot. You see, why people are looking at PSB as the alternative? Because as James mentioned just now, I do agree with James. When you look at their manifesto, you read their manifesto, for me, I think it's quite impressive. It's quite impressive. And then when you go to the coffee shops, right? And then when you whisper to people which party they're going to vote for, they just mention one color. They say it's red. So when it's red, meaning PSB, that's how impactful the choice of color is. And then I think it's a good strategy as well to choose a striking color. And when you go everywhere, let's say you go to Samarahan, right? Samarahan is where I live. You look at PSB's flags. The flags overwhelm the flags from GPS and DAP. And people will always say, when they go and when they see me, right, sitting at a coffee shop, and when I joke them which vote this time, they say it's all red. So that shows that how impactful that PSB is in terms of trying to offer themselves as the alternative compared to PKR and DAP. Yeah.
Thank you, Doc. Prof. James, I heard this slogan being coined by GPS, Sarawak First. Is of course is emulate from American First and whatnot. But how is that slogan Sarawak First translate into votes, you think, this Saturday?
Well, it sounds very much like the Trump American First thing. Sarawak First actually was a slogan that was used many years ago. It emanates from a strong sense of regional or Sarawak identity. It was actually goes all the way back to the 1960s. In those days, they call it Sarawak for Sarawakians. Sarawak National Party was the first one that played on this sentiment. So Sarawak First, I think, is a very simple slogan, widely understood immediately. It talks about a strong sense of Sarawak identity. So I think it's a sort of encompasses everything that GPS believes in, which is that they're trying to set up a very strong state, which has very unique feature, and they're very different from the rest of Malaysia. So they're sort of trying to build a wall around it. So I think the slogan is extremely effective. All groups in internet Sarawak First, immediately they understand what people are talking about, right? It means everything should be what they call it, priority to Sarawakians. But I just like to add on to Arnold's answer. Arnold, just now on your question on Pakatan Harapan, he spoke a bit about PKR. but he didn't say much about the DAP. So I'll say a bit about the DAP here. I think really interestingly enough, this time I think the DAP is in big trouble in the urban areas. I hear a lot of unhappiness in the Chinese community on the DAP. I find that really interesting because in the last few elections, although people were also complaining about DAP, in the end they voted for the DAP. This time I'm not so sure. And I think the analysis of Arnold is absolutely correct. It's because there is an alternative PSB. But more than that, I think it's also the fact that this time a lot of the people who normally would go and vote, they will say, because of COVID, I don't want to vote. And therefore, there's an inbuilt excuse for them not to go out. When you don't go out, right, it also means a no vote to DAP as well. So it's an indirect form of protest. So I think for the DAP, I would suggest to you and the audience that they will have a hard time holding on to the existing seats.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Back to Ben, if I may. The national politics is also clustered with issue of, unfair level playing field in political scene. For example, there's allegation of gerrymandering and all that. If I may ask whether the same issue also applicable to Sarawak, how fair is seat allocation in Sarawak, in your view?
I think this is the problem we see across the country, that the seat sizes are definitely unequal. There's always been made a case by the authorities in power that, the rural seats have smaller numbers of voters because the land area is bigger, so it's much harder for the Adun or the member of parliament to cover these places. But if you look at the seat sizes, the numbers of voters in Sarawak, we see the same problems. Like some of the seats are 7,000 to 10,000 voters, but the ones in the urban areas may be twice, 3 times that size. So you do have this problem of malapportionment where the seat sizes are very, very different from one another. That's one problem. And then, and also perhaps, people may want to make an argument about the representativeness of some of the seats. Whether or not the Malay Melanau seats, are equal to their share of the population. So I think those are arguments that can be made. So we have the same, I would say, problems or arguments being made about the way the electoral boundaries are designed in Sarawak. And I think it's one of the reasons why I think in the future, maybe we need to, have these things looked at so that it's fairer and you get an election result that truly reflects the will of the people.
Thank you, Ben.
Could I just add on to, sorry.
Yes, please.
Okay. Ben raised a very important issue about the what they call the seating. I think the difference in Sarawak compared to other states, here it is drawn much more according to ethnicity compared to other states. That is my impression. So the idea is to increase the number of Malay or Muslim seats, and it's much more blatant in Sarawak. But the point I wanted to make was that the other unique thing about this election is that PBB, the linchpin of GPS, is going for 47 seats this time. So they're sending a very strong signal out there that, they can rule on their own with or without the rest of the 3 other parties. If you look at the pattern of seats in all the previous election, right, they just contest right at the borderline. They never cross over. This time, assuming they win all the 47 seats because they had 100% success rate in 2016. If they go for that, then really they can rule on their own. The other interesting thing is that this time there was sort of a very blatant seat grabbing within GPS. I've never seen that before. Here I want to refer to a very interesting case of the seat of Dudong in Sibu, where the president of one of the GPS component, PDP, went in there and grabbed the seat at the very last moment. Of course, to be fair, I have to be fair. he has shown an interest in that seat more than a year before the announcements was made. But I think a lot of people are very unhappy with the way he grabbed the seat at the very last minute. And that is quite unusual. The way you grab seats in GPS, if you're unhappy with other component parties, that you sponsor what is known as an independent, and then that independent will fight and win the seat, and so that guy joins you, and so it becomes a natural addition. You don't go and you know, how do you say that, jumping at the last minute, grab the seat when the other party has already bought a candidate, everything is signed up. It's a very subtle point, but it also shows that inside GPS, the normal rules of understanding and etiquette among all the leaders of the party may not be there.
All right, thank you, Prof. Back to Dr. Arnold. Just now you mentioned about manifesto and how well PSB drafted their manifesto. But I read your article last week. You were saying that manifesto is not a Bible. It's the same issue in Semenanjung where Tun Mahathir say manifesto bukan kitab suci. So how is manifesto, the you know, the effectiveness of manifesto impact voters in Sarawak? Is that something that they look into when they vote?
No, I mean, for one, nobody reads the manifesto, I mean, to be honest. Because if you look at GPS's manifesto, it's so, I mean, it's so bulky, it's so long. I mean, PSB's manifesto is a bit short. But then again, if you ask people on the ground, they don't read manifesto. But when you talk about issues in Sarawak, I think there are a lot of issues, and people don't just hook themselves with the manifesto. I think this is the thing about Sarawak, because if you really go to the ground, you go to Telangusan, you go to the Orang Ulusi, you go to Baklalan, people don't just talk about development. Yes, development is important, but there are other important issues to basically explore. For instance, if you go to the Bidayu areas, right, the issues of ethnicity is also very important. The contestation between those people who consider themselves as Bisingai, the Bisingai versus Biata Jagoy, for instance. If you go to Telangusan, the contestation between the Kayan and the Kanya, for instance. So if a Kayan is the Adun, then what happened to the Kanya, for instance? Now, if you go to Baklalan, it's not also about development. Then they look really at the Chalon as the main thing for them. Now, again, if you want to talk about development, I think the rural voters now, they are quite clever. Well, they don't really select the party. They don't choose for the candidate representing any party. But for them, the most important thing is the ability of the candidate to deliver. And that's why, as I mentioned to you earlier, when you say you want to build this, then you have to deliver, and deliver it fast. Then you will get our votes. For instance, I spoke to one penghulu in Pamit, and then he said it does not matter who the chalon is, as long as that chalon delivers in terms of giving tangible development benefits to the people. So I think this is what this really matters. Issue of tangible developments, issue of other local issues like ethnicity also play a very important role. So, meaning to say, in Sarawak, it is not just about development. It is not just development that influences people to vote for certain parties, but there are other localized issues that we have to look at.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Back to Professor Jim. I think this topic is a bit controversial. I read about Parti Bumi Kenyalang. You know, they make one line of their manifesto, their promise is that if they win the election, they will take Sarawak out from Malaysia, Sarawak independence out from Malaysia, the succession issue. Your take on that? Is that something that majority of Sarawak really want? Prof?
That is really the $64,000 question, isn't it? I mean, the thing is that there's never been any proper survey done on these issues, succession, autonomy, or what have you. So it's a question that's impossible to ask, impossible to answer. But PBK, as I mentioned earlier, the tagline is the quest of independence. Put it this way, I think most people, most reasonable people do not take that seriously, because nobody can see PBK capturing more than 42 seats and form the government. So in their mind, although they may have some sympathy towards the aim of the PBK, they also know that it is not grounded in reality. I think the other point is PBK is now a lightning rod because of the huge number of candidates he managed to put up. In fact, in the last few elections, I would say the last 4 elections, there's always been candidates who advocated for independence. I mean, you got people like the Star, Asparasi. They've been there in the last few elections. It's just that they never came up with so many candidates, and they never took such a high profile. But they've always, argue for Sarawak's independence. I think the public sentiment, on top of the public sentiment, I think the public sentiment is overwhelmingly, questioning the whole concept of Malaysia. I think you have to read this in part with a very strong push by GPS to promote Sarawak nationalism. So on the one hand, you push out Sarawak nationalism, and you got a group of people on the ground questioning the whole idea of Malaysia. So it's a combination of several factors that push this up. Now, having said that, I would argue that in all the previous elections I've studied about Sarawak, right, all the candidates who push on a single issue, which is promoting independence, as far as I know, all of them have lost the deposit. So my point is that a single issue like that doesn't win you votes. It must be aligned with something else. And this comes back to my earlier point that, a lot of people think that it is not realistic. I mean, how should I put it? Any reasonable person, right, would know that, just because you win the election, you take over the state government, you cannot just take Sarawak out of Malaysia easily. But then I could be wrong.
Yeah, may I add a bit? I a bit, James? Yeah,
Yes,
I
please,
think,
yes.
I think for me, the reason why PBK is using this as their battle cry, right, to win votes is because I think they believe in the fact that anti-Peninsula, anti-Malaya sentiment in Sarawak is strong, which I think it's true. It's quite strong. And regional identity is stronger as well compared to regional identity in Sabah. So I think they are riding on this quest for independence because they know that the majority of Sarawakians have this anti-Malaya feelings. But when you go and then ask Sarawakians in general, there are 2 types. Again, this is not based on any survey. Again, very sweeping generalization based on our conversation. You have one group of Sarawakians who say that yes, we have this anti-Malaya sentiment because Malayan leaders, federal government is not respecting the MS-63. So we do not want to secede from the federation. We just want to become a strong, independent, and autonomous state. That's the first group. And then the second group are those people who really, really want to secede because whenever they talk about secession, whenever they talk about independence, they always look at Singapore. They always look at Brunei. So they say they want to be like Singapore, very prosperous, very rich, and Brunei, and so on and so forth. So even in my class, but because there is one subject on secessionism, and when I throw this question to my student, a lot of my students, especially from Sabah and Sarawak, every semester between 70 to 80% of them say that yes, sir, we want Sabah and Sarawak to be separated from the federation. But then again, as what James said, when you go deeper, when you try to argue with them intellectually about the implication of seceding from the federation, then that's where they have difficulty in terms of answering you. So I think the anti-Malaya sentiment is still very strong. That is why parties like PPK is using this quest for independence as a way to try to win support.
I just want to add on to the point I made earlier about this independence thing. The other reason why it really works in Sarawak and to a certain extent in Sabah is that the narrative, like Sarawak First, is very simple to understand. So the narrative is that Sabah and Sarawak got a very raw deal when they helped to form the Federation of Malaysia, and they are treated as as third-class citizens since then, when they were made a whole host of promises. So this narrative is very powerful, it's very emotional, and everybody understands. Even if you're uneducated, you can understand that, our forefathers brought us into this thing called Federation of Malaysia so that our lives were better, but then our lives did not get better. And these narratives, all the supporting arguments for this narrative, also very simple to understand. Sabah and Sarawak have lots of oil and gas, and what happened to it? It all disappeared into Petronas Tower, KLIA, North-South Highway. Ben, you shouldn't be laughing. Because you benefit from it. You see, all these narratives are very simple and easy to understand. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter, because at this level, right, it makes sense, right? It makes sense. We don't have highway here. Why? Because all the oil and gas money was taken out and built the North-South Highway. You see, so narrative, as you know, in politics, right? Truth really doesn't matter. It's whether you can sell the narrative. So this is a narrative that is very simple to sell, highly emotional, coming on top of the state, promoting state nationalism. It's a bestseller.
All right, thank you, Prof. It's just that coming from Peninsula, issue of Borneo exit is not really amplified here. Not many of us understand this is a concern. It's a valid concern. The succession out from Malaysia.
No, but this is again very consistent with all the surveys done previously, that the Malayan political class have never taken Sabah and Sarawak seriously, because they see these people as ulu, underdeveloped, easy to control, throw them a few crumbs. So that's the reason why before 2008, the establishment in Malaya sees Sabah and Sarawak as fixed deposit. Fixed deposit means that nothing will shake it, right? You're guaranteed an income. It means that, no problem. It doesn't matter what happens in Malaya. Sabah and Sarawak will return the fixed deposit to the Dutching. So this already gives you attitude. So that's the reason why the passage of the MA 63 in Parliament was such an important issue, because this will lead to a changed mindset among the Malayan political class about the historical grievances of Sabah and Sarawak, and they have to deal with it. Without a change in mindset, I think we're not going to get anywhere.
Okay, I would like to ask Ben this issue. We are looking from Peninsula standpoints, right? Why is it the issue of succession of Sabah and Sarawak, this Borneo exit, is not really a concern to our politicians? I just want to understand that.
I think in part is because of the structure of our politics. If we are in Semenanjung, Malaysia, we are so consumed by the politics of UMNO, PAS and PKR, or DAP versus Barisan Nasional or MCA. So we are so again consumed by our own internal struggles, and the political dynamics in Semenanjung is confined to the political players in Semenanjung as well. It is actually the Barisan Nasional leaders of the past who look at Sabah Sarawak as a fixed deposit, because they have believed that they've got a hold over, or they've got the support of the chieftains, of the chiefs, people who control the politics in Sabah Sarawak. But as what Sabah has shown us in the last election, things can come undone, in the sense that parties that used to be, or leaders who used to be strong leaders within Barisan Nasional, they can exit, they can form their own parties and lead the state by themselves. As what we saw in 2018, Shafi Abdal, created a splinter party from UMNO Sabah, and he nearly won a majority. He didn't win majority, but there were some defections in 2018 that allowed him to form a short-lived state government at that point in time. Now, we haven't reached the state situation in Sarawak, in the sense that the GPS parties, particularly PBB, hasn't really splintered, in any way. We've seen some splinters in PRS or something like that, but not the main party, But as we look at examples of how other dominant parties around the world have fallen, it almost always comes from splintering. If a leader within the party decides to break away, or there's a falling out within the party itself, then the party will weaken, and this is taken advantage by the opposition, and then things can change. I think in the situation of potential Borneo exit, this question about an enlarged autonomy, I think little by little it has started to seep into the thinking between the peninsular elites. I think that's already there, starting to emerge, but it hasn't fully sunk in. The passing in Parliament yesterday, that hasn't fully sunk in either. It is, I think, going to happen in the next budget when Sabah and Sarawak start to demand more say in terms of how federal funding is going to be allocated and spent in their state. And I think within the elites itself, it will be determining who gets what kind of contracts, to partake in the development projects in a much more robust way. I think that's when we see these things unfold. Within certain areas, let's say the oil and gas industry, we do know that, Sarawak has started its petroleum tax, started its Petros, and I noticed in the news that Sabah is also doing up its own oil and gas company, So that move is slowly taking motion. So in some ways, it is reflective of the weakness of the center. Putrajaya is a lot weaker than it used to be. And so as the center becomes weak, all the centrifugal forces, are pulling it away, So I wouldn't, be surprised if some of the formerly unfederated Malay states like Terengganu and Kelantan and Johor also start demanding all kinds of stuff, I won't be surprised if even Selangor starts to demand stuff because they're paying the biggest share of taxes to the federal government.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with Ben because I think this rise of MS63 started in 2008 and 2013 when Sabah and Sarawak contributed quite substantially to Parliament, and the fact that federal power had weakened, state leaders used that opportunity to demand for more autonomy. But then again, if I compare Sabah and Sarawak, I think Sarawak is doing it much more strategically than Sabah, because Sabah is a bit more sporadic. They are here and there. Everybody wants to become a hero, but nobody really wants to study it, to go to the details and present a strong demand to the federal government. But I think in a way, Sarawak has done a better job in demanding for more autonomy strategically from the federal government.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. I would like to ask the question back to Prof. James. The episode of, Sarawakian leaders was prevented from contesting. The instruction came and dictated by a national party, and then there was this episode where they changed their mind and then they withdrew last minute. What is your view on that? How the political master from Semenanjung dictating a Sarawakian leader not to contest, is that something big? What is your take on that?
My take is very simple. That reinforced the anti-Malaya sentiments, because it goes to prove that again, the Malayans are trying to interfere in Sarawak affairs. I don't think that was a big deal. You're talking about Ali Biju. I think the deal was already done that if he does not kacau this time, he'll be allowed to stand as MP next round. But I suspect they can't enforce that political deal next round. I'll tell you the reason why in a little while. But can I add on to what Arnold said about the difference between Sabah and Sarawak? I think the big difference between Sabah and Sarawak was the watershed moment in 1990 when UMNO entered Sabah. I think when UMNO entered Sabah, they brought their West Malaysian political culture into Sabah, especially UMNO way of doing things. I think that really disrupted the organic Sabah political dynamics. I think ever since then, I think Sabah politics, how should I put it, has been different. So this is one of the key difference between Sabah and Sarawak. That in Sarawak, none of the major Malayan parties are there other than PAS. But you know, PAS has actually a Sarawak chapter where they send the delegates. But other than that, there's no MCA office in Kuching, there's no Gerakan office in Kuching, but there's a PAS office in Kuching. So other than PAS, West Malaysia is not represented.
All right. The next round, I would like to touch about the elephant in the room, money politics. We have this issue of, you know, cash is king is accepted. You know, not all.
Started by Malayan.
but it's generally accepted here that, you know, cash is king. I just want to know the sentiment in Sarawak. Is that the same issue, money politics? What's your view on that?
Okay. I mean, you want me? Okay.
Go ahead.
The way. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I think it's very important that the viewers understand that cash for votes in Sarawak is not seen as a bribe. Okay. The reason is because I'm doing a service for you. I'm helping you to win, so I can be compensated. It is also seen as part of the natural electoral process. That if you want my support, you come and bring stuff to my longhouse. We have a big celebration. The issue of storytelling is very important, having feasts and what have you. So giving money in ordinary times, right, is seen as helping the family. So during election time, it's just that because of election time, it's tied to the vote. But it is not seen as a bribe. I think that's a really, really important point. Because you know, among the Bansa crowd or in the Klang Valley, people think, oh, that's terrible. People using money to buy votes and everything. I just want to tell people that it is not seen as a bribe. The other important point, I think, to understand about this vote buying is that this vote buying is also a highly competitive business. There's no such thing as a standard rate. So you know, if the place is highly competitive, the amount of money actually goes up. So it also have a market mechanism to it. So in a hotly contested seat, you know, some of the billets were getting $300 to $500. In a non-competitive seat, you might end up with 100 ringgit. So there are many layers of this so-called vote buying that I think is important that people understand for it. The best way to describe it is that it's part of Sabah and Sarawak's political culture. But the thing is that Malayans should not look at it in a funny way, because increasingly there are reports of the same thing coming out in places like Kelantan. How should I put it? This sort of money to help families are coming up as well.
Doctor, do you want to add to that? Money politics in Sarawak?
Yeah, I mean, money politics can be seen in various ways. For some politicians, for some YBs, they don't consider it as bribing. You know, it's just a show of generosity. I just give you one example. I don't want to mention them, but we did a study on money politics. So we interviewed this one very famous politician in the rural area. So after that, we were done with the interview. He called us and then he gave money to us. So mind you, that is money politics at its best. But then for him, it's just a show of generosity. And then the amount that he was giving us was quite substantial. So we refused to accept it, and we said, no, that is just for your petrol, for your lunch and things like that. So for some politicians in the rural area, they don't consider it as giving bribe to the voters. It's just that they're being generous to them, you know, and then the voters accept it as a sign of friendship, for instance. So that's always the case in the context of Sabah and Sarawak. I mean, in particular Sabah.
But recently I read that, you know, there's one party which stipulated in manifesto they will give 3,000 ringgit per every Sarawakian if they win election, and SPRM actually went down and investigate them. How was that differentiate between the show of generosity?
I think these are all public knowledge, so you shouldn't say this party. Just name the party. We all know who you're talking about.
Yeah, PBK.
It's PBK, right? Okay. So
Which party are you talking about, Liyana?
I think it's in manifesto PBK.
They had this passport PBK. So
I just so
PSB, you mean,
I
right?
just
You
want to
mean
understand.
PSB?
I think it's
Look, this is completely normal because we're just highlighting PBK because the MACC was trying to build a case around it. But actually, you look at PSB, they were also offering money, which is even more because they offer money according to age, how old you have a children, and you get the money every month rather than one-off 3,000 per passport. But even the GPS, they've been offering money since the pandemic. They call it BKSS. So they've been giving money out left and right. So I don't think that is an issue. I don't think anybody in Sarawak sees that as bribery, or as Arnold said, it is simply government helping the people. I mean, that's how I see it.
So I just want to understand. So the fine line between voters buyout, then the show of generosity.
This is what I was trying to tell you just now. It's not buying votes. The voters and both the giver and the recipient, right, don't see as bribery. They don't see as I give you money, you vote for me. That may have been the consequences, but that's not how the internal logic works up there.
Maybe it's not that influence the vote. There are many other issues.
Oh, it influenced the vote. It influenced the vote. I don't know how to. I know you explain it. You're at UNIMAS, so please explain it.
No, you already explained it well.
Okay. Maybe it's
Because Liyana, because it's not easy for us to. Of course, if you say a politician gives you money, then with the hope that that person will vote for you, right? But there's no way for you to find out that when you give money, then the person will vote for you or he will vote for the other candidate.
But what are the dynamics of the voters? Is it who give the most will get my vote? Is that how they see things then? Because it's a competition, like Prof. James.
There's no way for us to
market force that determine. And then I just want to understand the voters' dynamic there. Is it how they decide who to vote? Who is the most generous? Then they vote like that. Is that how?
That's always the case. Yes. Especially in hotly contested seats, in competitive seats where let's say you need 200 voters to swing in your favor. So when you can go as high as 500 or 1,000 even in the case of Sabah. So that's normal.
Interesting. Okay, we have 15 more minutes. I'm just waiting for any question from the viewers. Please feel free. We have a Q&A segment. You can just ask and I can direct the question to the panelists. Meanwhile, I think this is the final round. We have only 15 minutes. Ben, the last round, perhaps you can reiterate to us how is this PRN Sarawak will shape or have impact on the national politics?
Yeah, I think this election in many ways is pivotal because GPS is seen by whether Perikatan or UMNO, Barisan Nasional, as a potential partner in the future. So how GPS performs in this election is going to be an indicator of how it's going to perform in the general election as well. So if GPS performs well in this state election, it also means that they can come back with perhaps more than 19 parliamentary seats in the future general election. We don't know exactly when this next general election will be. It could be sometime next year, or it could be, as the Prime Minister wishes, sometime in 2023. There's still dynamics around that question. But it's a clear indication that both sides, Barisan as well as Perikatan, is trying to woo GPS, and GPS really needs to show both potential partners that they are strong, they can deliver the seats. So if you can do better than 20 seats in this election, definitely they will have a seat at the table. But more critically, the more seats they have in terms of numbers, the more they can demand in the future, because no longer are they just fixed deposit. now they are kingmakers. They can make or break a government. So that's very, very essential. And with it comes the role that Chief Minister Abang Jo will have a stronger say in the future direction of his state, the autonomy that he seeks, and also managing Putrajaya in the future. So I think it's important for GPS to do really well. For the opposition parties, particularly DAP and PKR, I think they just need to try and cling on to whatever they have, because if they don't perform well, as what our other panelists are saying tonight, then they will be losing momentum. People will be questioning their leadership again, in the coming weeks, and definitely they will be on the defensive for the rest of 2022.
Thank you, Ben. We have two questions from the viewers. The first question is from Anwar R. Maybe perhaps may I request Doctor to respond to that. The question is, how do you think that Undi 18 will impact Sarawak in the next PRN or GE 15? Will it have an impact? Please, Doctor.
Undi 18, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, but based on my observation on Undi 18, especially I'm talking specifically about the young voters in Sarawak. The young voters in Sarawak are not necessarily influenced by issues in Peninsular Malaysia. Yes, of course, they are concerned about employment. They are concerned about opportunities. They are concerned about placement in the universities and all that. But interestingly, at the same time, most are also influenced by issues unique to Sarawak, like autonomy, Sarawak identity, and all that. So whoever is, it doesn't matter whether GPS, DAP, or PKR, as long as they can package the issue of autonomy, the issue of MSC3 well, and then sell it to the young people. I think that young people can go anywhere, because all this while we've been told that the young people are supportive, are strong supporter to the opposition, but that is not always the case in Sarawak. They can go to GPS, they can also go to DAP, they can also go to the other alternatives.
I think. All right. Thank you, Doctor. The next question from the viewers is from Theo Elvin. Perhaps I ask Professor James to answer this. How many seats PSB, PKR, and PBK will probably win, and where? It's a prediction question. Go ahead.
I don't know, because I don't feel the mood at all this time. But I can tell you that at the start of the election, the number of competitive seats agreed by both sides was about 20 to 25. And now the number of competitive seats has dropped to below 20.
Okay, then it's hard to predict. The next question is from No Shazrina Ali. She asks, I would like to ask on Bersatu and GPS will work together in GE15. What is your comment? Doctor, you want to comment on that?
Let James comment first.
Oh, my answer has always been very consistent from day one. GPS will work with whoever controls the federal government.
Straightforward answer. There you are.
Yeah, yes, I've been saying this also in many of my writings. There will be, I think GPS is a pragmatic entity. It's a pragmatic bloc coming from Sarawak. So whoever is in power at the federal level, they will support, because that will work in their favor.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. I think this is the last question for the two panelists. I go back to Doctor first. If you can share the Sarawak voters' expectation on their elected representative. What are the criteria or the expectation that they have for the elected?
Oh, okay. Just deliver.
Deliver in terms of?
In terms of what you have promised, I mean, doesn't matter whether what we have promised is written in the manifesto, but if you say you want to develop your area, so I think the expectation of the rural people, especially the voters, is that they want wakil rakyat, or they want calon who really deliver, who talks less but work more. I think that is the sentiment that is generally shared with me by the voters.
Okay, thank you, Doc. Prof. James, last word from you. Any advice or any comments to Sarawak voters for this PRN Sarawak?
I never give advice because all the people I give advice with have never done very well. The only thing I want to say is that this is not a watershed election, and I think even using the word election is probably wrong. I keep using the word that this is really a referendum on the rebranding, and it's really a referendum on Abanjo. If you see from that aspect, then a lot of things make sense. And the final thing is that within the wider context, I agree with Ben completely. This will have major national implications because what happens in Sarawak, I'm not talking just about the number of MPs, right? What Sarawak can get away with in terms of state autonomy, right? There are several other states who will be watching closely, not least Sabah, not least Kelantan, and let's not forget Johor. Johor has a very assertive group of people as well.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I think I should the best for last. Ben, any last word from you on PRN Sarawak? Please?
Yeah, I think, if I may want to say this, this election comes very close in the heels of the Malacca state election. And, we all know what the results will be. And the question is, how big will GPS win? How will Abang Jo be able to address the internal dissension or conflicts within his own party? And how will he be able to come out of this? And from there, it sets the stage for national elections. I speak more from a national perspective in here in Kuala Lumpur. I think a lot of the politicians in Kuala Lumpur are looking at Sarawak in order to get the momentum going for the general election. If Sarawak GPS wins well, that means the mood is with them. They will want to continue to pressure for earlier general elections. So perhaps, even as soon as before Ramadan, even, some voices we hear. So if that is the case, then, we are going to have a very volatile political period. If not, we will still have a volatile political situation unfolding within the ruling party, within UMNO itself, because of the groups that want early election versus the group that wants earlier party election. So it's going to play into that. The big question mark is, if the general election is not held soon, will the opposition, Pakatan Harapan, be able to recover in time? Because I think they are headed towards a very challenging, very, very tough situation in Sarawak. So the rest of 2022 is going to be a long period of soul searching and trying to lick their wounds and find a way to come back. And so will they be able to do that? We have to see. Time will tell. But I think Sarawak voters, will see whether or not, what James said. How will they reflect on Abang Jo's stewardship of the state? How has the rebranding proceeded? Are people really confused about the logo? We'll soon see.
Okay, I think thank you very much. I think that's all the time we have. I would like to thank all our three panelists, Ben, Professor James, and also Dr. Arnold for your time tonight. Also to all our viewers who were with us for the past 1.5 hours. Thank you very much. Hopefully we see each other again. Hopefully not during any by-election or PRN. Hopefully during the next PRU 15. So with that, I thank you all and selamat malam Malaysia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
See you, Ben.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Arnold.
Thank you, James.
See you, Ben. See you, Arnold.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.